This is our second video on piecewise functions, and in this one we're going to address how to graph piecewise functions. And I wanted to start with showing you an example of what piecewise functions look like. You'll notice they look like multiple lines graphed on the same graph, but each one is only taking up a certain piece of the graph. For example, let's grab a highlighter so we can identify. This over here is only on this half of the graph. That line is only being graphed where x is less than or equal to 0. Our other function, f of x is equal to 2x plus 1, they want that one graphed where x is greater than 0. So you only see it show up over here on the right side of the graph where the x values are all greater than 0. You see a similar thing on the second one. We have one graph, and it's all on the left-hand side. And then the second part is only graphed on the right-hand side of the graph. And so when we look at the piecewise function, it's going to tell us where it wants each equation graphed. And that's going to be the key thing for graphing these functions. So when we start, we see that our first function here, we have y equals 2x, y equals 2, and y equals negative 2x. So we're actually going to have 3 different lines on this graph, but each one gets its own section. So the first one is only going to be graphed where x is less than or equal to negative 2. So I'm going to look at my x-axis. I know it equals negative 2 right about here, and all the values less than negative 2 are going to be that direction. So my first function is only going to be graphed on this piece of the graph. The second equation, they only want us to graph it between where x is negative 2 and positive 2. So that's going to be from here to here. So if I want, I can just highlight that whole section so I know that that's going to go here in the green section. All right. And then the last equation, they only want us to graph if x is greater than or equal to negative 2. So that's going to be over here in this last section of the graph. Now I'm ready to go ahead and start graphing. And the first one I'm going to graph is y equals 2x. That's the first one. Well, I know that y equals 2x has a y-intercept of 0, which is right here, and a slope of positive 2. So I could go up 2 and over 1, but I know, and put a dot right there, but I know that I only want the graph to be in the yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of draw my dots, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. But I only want to actually connect them over here in the yellow. Now I need to decide if I have an open circle or a closed circle. This says open because it's just a less than. So I'm going to put an open circle there where the green and yellow meet. And then I'm going to connect so that my line only is in the yellow. The next one I'm going to graph is y equals 2. That's this one here. Well, y equals 2 is just a horizontal line at y equals 2. I know I'm going to have a solid circle on the negative 2, so that's here. And I'm going to have an open circle where it equals positive 2. And then I'm just going to draw the line in between them. And then for the last one, we have y equals negative 2x. So for this one, again, I have a y-intercept of 0. I'm going to have to switch to black for this one again. Y equals negative 2x. A y-intercept of 0. This time our slope is negative 2. So I'm going to go down 2 and over 1 for each one. But this one I know was only for the blue. I have a greater than or equal to, so that tells me I'm going to have a solid circle on the line. And then I'm just going to connect the dots. So now I have 3 different equations graphed all on the same thing. Now once I've done this, they want me to talk about the domain and the range. The domain, since our first one continues to go to the left, and our second one continued to the right, and this top one has everything in between those. The domain is going to be all real numbers. The range, however, seems to have a break. We have a y value of 2 up here, but then our second one, it doesn't start till negative 4. So we're going to say this in 2. We're going to say y is equal to 2, And then we're going to say y is also, it goes all the way down, so it's going to be less than or equal to, because this one's a solid circle here, and that's at -4, so less than or equal to -4. So now we've graphed all three equations on that one graph and talked about the domain and the range. For this second one, this one's called a step function because if you look at all of these, they're all number values. So each one of these is a horizontal line. So another option, instead of doing the shading first like I did there, is to graph all three lines first. So I'm going to first graph y equals -1. That's a horizontal line at -1. So that's this line. Then I'm going to graph the second line at y equals 0. That's this one. And I'm going to graph the third line, y equals 1, right here. Now, once I've done that, if I want, I can go back and say, okay, this one was only where x was less than -1. And I can kind of draw a little vertical line here for where x is less than -1. Then this one, let's see, let's get a different color. This one was only where x was between that -1 and less than +2. So I can kind of see where I want things now. And I'm going to go ahead and erase the pieces I don't need. Y was equal to -1 only to the left of the pink. So I don't need any of this piece. Y was equal to 0 only in between -1 and -1 and +2. So I didn't need any of this. And I didn't need any of this. And then for the last one, y was 1 only when x was greater than 2. So I don't need anything except for the stuff that's left of there. Now once I get to this point, I do want to be sure I go back and look for, is it a solid circle or an open circle? This one, less than or equal to, that's going to be a solid circle. Okay. This one, open circle, open circle. And then the last one, that's going to be a solid circle. So we're going to start right here. This one, again, we can see that the domain is all real numbers. But the range is kind of strange again, because the range is only where y is equal to -1, 0, and +1. Those are the only y values that are used. So there's a couple of examples of graphing equations. And sometimes you're going to be asked to do things where you write the equations for graphs like this. And so you would set up y equals, draw your brackets, and be ready for your ifs at the end. We can see the dividing line right here is at 0. So one is going to be if x is less than 0, and the other one's going to be if x is greater than or equal to 0. And I decided whether or not they were equal to based on the solid dots and the open dots. This one where it's greater than 0 is a horizontal line at 3, so y is just 3. This line here seems to have a slope of about -3/2. Maybe not, maybe it's -7/5, we'll say that. -7/5x, it has a y-intercept of 0, so I would leave it just like that.